Hello students! In this video series, I'm going to give you a quick review of some concepts that you learned in Music 191, just to give you a little bit of a refresher and a little bit of an update of some small changes that I'm going to make this year compared to last year. Let's get started. How to label Roman numerals. So our method for labeling Roman numerals is likely going to be very similar to what you did last year. You might remember that for each chord, a Roman numeral represents certain information about that chord. The number of the Roman numeral indicates what scale degree that the chord is built on. So if I have Roman numeral 2, for example, it means that we're building a chord on the second note of the scale. Different theory textbooks use different styles for writing the actual Roman numeral. Some use uppercase only, whereas some differentiate between uppercase and lowercase depending on the quality of the chord. I'm going to use the term quality when describing chords throughout the year of this year. And what I mean when I say that is basically, is it major, minor, diminished, augmented, or one of the other new types of chords that we're going to learn this year. So keep that in mind. Quality means major, minor, or something else. In this course, I'm going to use upper and lowercase to indicate quality. And it's going to be very important that we make this distinction, particularly going into Music 293. Why is that the case? Well, because we're going to actually learn new chords that fit outside of the accidentals of the key, for which we'll need the other sizes of Roman numerals to represent. So we can't just represent everything as uppercase, or else we don't have enough information to tell those chords apart. So in my example here, a 2 chord written in the following way, because I'm using lowercase to indicate this chord, that means that this is a minor chord. We will occasionally add some extra symbols to our Roman numerals as well to indicate extra information. So for example, you probably remember from last year the little circle beside the Roman numeral. This indicates that you're dealing with a diminished chord. Diminished are written as lowercase with the circle attached. Technically, we can also use the X symbol to represent augmented, although you're going to discover that we actually don't use that super frequently in this course, simply because augmented chords are actually quite rare in music, particularly music of what's called the common practice period. That's what we think of as our Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven time period. You do get augmented chords more in 20th century and 21st century music. And then lastly, we're going to have a few situations where we have additional information in terms of accidentals included around the chord. If we have an accidental to the left of the Roman numeral, that means that we're altering the root of this chord. So for example, if I was to add a sharp sign beside my 2 chord, that means that rather than being built on the regular second note of the scale, we raise that second note of the scale a semitone before we build our chord on top of it. My system will always use sharp to indicate semitone higher and flat to indicate semitone lower. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to be consistent about the way that I'm labeling Roman numerals regardless of the key. So I want to be able to take, for example, a flat 2 chord and be able to interpret it the same regardless of whether I'm in D flat major or G minor. Others will use the actual accidentals that are represented in the music. I'm not going to do that. So just be aware of that. Sharp is going to mean semitone higher, flat is going to mean semitone lower. And finally, we sometimes get accidentals and numerals to the right of the Roman numeral. And you probably recall seeing this from 191. The numbers are indicating inversion, but specifically what they're indicating is the interval above the base that the note occurs in that particular inversion. So if we're seeing the figure 6-3, what that means is we have a note that's a sixth above the base and a note that's a third above the base. These get abbreviated with our very standard inversions. So 6-3 is more commonly written as just 6, because the assumption is we know that 6-3 is the most common inversion. So you might want to pause the video here, but here's the usual abbreviations. And then you might also remember from last year that sometimes accidentals are added beside those inversion numbers. So for example, if I had a sharp beside my 3 symbol, I'm going to take that third interval and I'm going to raise it a semitone. Now, I'm going to be honest. I tend to use a slightly different system than what Dr. Burge uses to represent some of this. So I'm going to omit some of those things in cases where they are the default way of presenting a chord. So for example, in the dominant chord in minor, you might remember from 191 that you normally raise the leading tone in that chord. That's actually the default way we typically see that chord presented. And that information is already represented by the fact that we're using 5 as uppercase. Uppercase means major chord. So to add the sharp 3 beside it is actually redundant. We already know that information by the uppercase 5. So in this course, we're going to omit that information because of this reason. So there's a review on how to label chords. It turns out we can literally label any triad structure chord, regardless of the intervals, once we know these 3 basic pieces of information. Thanks, I'll see you in the next video.